Hey everybody, how's it going? Can you all see me and hear me and stuff? Maybe not. Looks like it dropped. Oh, it's back. I don't know. If you can hear me, say something in the chat. Hopefully this is working. Maybe not. Hey, cool. Okay, maybe it's working. On my end, it's saying YouTube's not getting enough data fast enough, so maybe I can tweak that. Or maybe I can't. Maybe it's too late for that. Anyway, maybe it'll buffer a bit, but that's okay. So, cool. Welcome everyone. So I hope you've been staying safe these crazy times. Thought we could do something a little fun to take our minds off the crazy virus stuff, and work on some CSS. So I sent out a challenge a couple days ago. Looks like, actually, let me switch to my screen here. Cool. Something like this. So hopefully some people got a chance to work through this and try to recreate this with HTML and CSS. I saw a couple people made some good progress in the GitHub issues, so cool. Thanks for posting stuff there. So I thought today we could go through just trying to go, build this out in HTML and CSS and get as far as we can. I don't know how far we'll be able to get in an hour or so, but we'll see. Once it's done, I'll post the solution up to the GitHub, and you can all check it out. And this stream is going to be recorded by YouTube, so if you have to drop off or whatever, just come on back whenever. And same link. You should be able to see the finished thing. So okay, cool. So we've got this design here by Imran on Dribbble, and this is not my design. This is Imran's design, but it just looked like a cool dashboard, so I thought we could build off of this. So right now I've got like super boilerplatey HTML here and empty CSS. I stole this from Code Sandbox. We go to like Code Sandbox and just take their index HTML. That's what this is. And I've got live server running in the background. So you can, this is just a command, you can install like npm install -g live server. And you'll get this utility, and you just run it in a directory and it'll give you a server that auto refreshes. So as we change stuff here, we should be able to see it show up real quick. Cool. Get rid of that one. So yeah, so let's see, where do we start with this? I think maybe a good place to start would be to just kind of get the general layout in place. When I was working through this yesterday, I kind of like started with just the sidebar. I got this in place and I went down, and then I did the middle section and kind of went down. So I think we can do something like that. Let's just try to get the main structure in place first. And we've got nothing here, so let's just kind of reset some things. We'll say body, we don't want to, it's going to have some sort of margin that we want to reset, and some padding that we'll reset. And for larger projects, or for like real projects, I guess, you could go find some, Google for CSS reset. There's a bunch of like useful stuff, but I'd want it to start with nothing here so we can kind of see what's going on. So if we save that, you can see the margin goes away. We've got this like right up against the corner now. And then we've got this font here. So I went looking around for fonts, and there was a GitHub issue about this too. TT Commons is pretty close. It's not the same, but it's pretty close. So that's what I'm going to use here. Just found it on the web and installed it locally. So I'm going to set for the body, we'll set font family to TT Commons. Work with what we've got here. So I'm going to start with 14. And so the other thing I ran into is like trying to, let's make this, let's see. So we need this like sidebar thing. So we're going to have like nested divs for this whole page. We've got like one is, we can say the body is the surrounding container. We've got like a div for the sidebar, a div for the maybe content, I guess, and a div for this other sidebar thing like stats or something. So let's kind of add some of these things in place here. So just going to pull up some notes too. So we'll have our div sidebar. And in here, let's say sidebar. And we can kind of copy it down for content, and we'll call it stats, I guess. Content, stats. Audio issue here. Is it still broken? Can anyone else hear? I think maybe the streaming was kind of flaky for a minute there, but it might be better now. Let me know. Drop a message in the chat if you can hear or if you can't hear. I'll keep going. So, so we've got our 3 pieces of content here, and we need to space them out, obviously. So this is like unstyled right now. So we'll give the sidebar. So originally I tried making this giving this thing a width. Okay, cool, it's working, nice. Giving this thing its own width and setting this to like height of 100%, because normally like the body will only be as high as the content. We can see this if we like open up DevTools, click on this, hover over body. You can see that blue box is like only up top there, which is not what we want. We want the height to be 100%. And that will, well, sometimes that works. So body is inside HTML, which also needs to be height of 100%. And you get this problem where like you have to go down the tree, like giving everything 100% height, and that doesn't. It's only like window height. So if like DevTools is taking up some of the space, it'll be less. Anyway, so I scrapped that idea, and we're just going to use display grid on body, which will make it full height by itself. And actually, well, it won't, but if we tell it to be full height, that'll work. So we've got 3, yeah, so CSS grid just gave us like 3 rows, I think, by default. So we can tell this grid like how to lay itself out, and we'll use grid template columns. The first one's going to be 220 pixels or so. So as I was going through this, I pretty much just kept Sketch open and like drew boxes to measure things. So like this is roughly 220-ish. Just kind of went with round numbers everywhere. I mean, it's like 223, but yeah, 220, close enough. We'll go with 220 there. I think the middle section, to make this kind of fluid, I'll say that the side is a width, and then the middle is expandable, and then this side is a fixed width too. So let's measure this side over here, and this is like, say, maybe 335. Close enough. So we'll use 1 FR in the middle and 335 on the right. So this 1 FR thing is 1 fractional unit, and CSS Grid will just make, this will take up like 1 fraction of the available space. And since it's the only fractional unit, it will take up like all of the available space. So we'll get this fixed thing, this will take up the rest, and then the thing on the right. And if we do that, we can see it's spaced out. Cool. So our sidebar needs some sort of a background color. Again, I was just like made a box and like sampled colors from this thing. So we could just take that color and give this a background of not sidebar. Nope, nope, nope. Copy and paste. Sweet. All right. Cool. All right. Coming along. We can also give, we'll give stats its own background too. And this is like a much lighter gray. Let's figure this out. 5, 6, 5, 6, whatever. Cool. Okay, so we've got that, and we've got this middle section, and actually the middle section is the same thing, but we've got these little gaps. So we'll talk about the gaps in a second too. Content is going to be background, same. Cool. And so the design has these little white gaps between the sections, and CSS Grid has a way of doing gaps. So we can say like grid gap is 20 pixels. And so this will give us gaps between everything horizontally and vertically, but since we only have one row here, it's fine. You can do like grid column gap that would just do columns, but doesn't really matter here. So the tool I'm using here is called Sketch. It's a Mac app. There's Figma is another popular design app that's like web-based. But yeah, I've been using Sketch for a while. It's a good app. It's not free though. There's other ways you can, other ways to like sample colors and stuff. You could, I guess for sampling colors anyway, you can drag this into Chrome and like use the color picker. Like if you just say color whatever here, you can click on this and sample stuff from the image. So if you like manage to get the image into here, you get colors out of it. That'll work fine too. There's also like color picker tools for different OSs. Second there. All right. So cool. So we've got this. Let's start filling in some content here. So we have this Cloud.io logo up here. I'm not going to recreate this thing from scratch. I just copied it out of here and made an image out of it. I did that with a bunch of these little icons and stuff too. So let's get the logo in here. So under sidebar, first thing is going to be that image. Source is images/logo.png. In the GitHub repo, there's an images directory with all the stuff that I'm using here. So there's a bunch of little things that I just took out of the design, some faces I got from uifaces.co, and a bunch of little icons I got from Feather Icons. Those are all linked in the repo too. So this is the Cloud.io logo. See if we get something decent there. Cool. We got to put it somewhere, but let's just get the content in place and we can worry about kind of putting it where it's supposed to go in a minute. So underneath that is like a navigation stuff. And I'm going to use a nav element for that, just to be a little more semantic than just the div or whatever. Inside here, so you could do an unordered list of elements with a bunch of LIs. I think I'm just going to do divs just because they're simple in this case, just to make them like direct children of nav. Yeah, I think that's fine. So we'll call these, give these a nav item class. And this top one, if you notice in the design, is active, like it's white and it's got this little border. So we'll need a class to be able to target the active ones. So I'm going to give this one an active class. We'll fill that in a bit. So this is going to be home, and we've got an image that is at images/home.svg. We'll give this some alt text that says home. Okay, cool. So we got something there. It's not the right color, but it's there. So let's just do a bunch more of these. Actually, I'm just going to copy some existing ones because you don't want to watch me type all these out. There we go. Okay, neat. So all these icons came from Feather Icons, like a free icon set. And you can just like click and download one. So I realized later, if we go to Feather Icons, neat. So if we like just search for home, you get the little home icon. If you just click the icon, it'll download that file and you can use it. One thing I didn't realize until after I downloaded all these icons was that the color is configurable. So you can set this to, you know, whatever color you actually want it to be. It'll customize the icon. You can change the size, stroke width and everything, and download like a customized icon and not have to mess with it afterwards. I didn't do that at first, so I've got like a bunch of black icons that I need to change the color of. And I found some interesting tool for solving this problem. I linked it in the README. So go over to, where's this thing? It's like a code pen. Yeah, this thing, CSS filter generator. So because these are SVGs, if you put the SVG code directly into the file here, like if instead of using image, if we made like an SVG tag, like copy and paste the stuff out of the image here, we could change the fill color. We could change the stroke and stuff. But since it's an image, we can't do that. So there's this nifty thing where you can paste in a color you want. So let's say we want to make these things, well, whatever color they are. What color is this? 77 something something. Okay, take this and paste it into our little converter. And this generates this crazy long filter thing of color transformations. And if you drop this into the image, it'll change the color of the underlying image. Filter is like pretty well supported. I think IE 11 doesn't support it. So like, it's the usual thing. So if you're actually doing this and you need to support IE, you know, change your images maybe, or paste in the SVGs. But since I didn't do that, we'll just do this filter trick. So we need these. These are everything under the nav item. So we can say sidebar.nav item, which is going to. So if you're not familiar with CSS selectors, should have explained this earlier. So the dot selector is targeting elements that have a class of sidebar. So we've only got one, right? That's this div. And so we're setting the width and background on that one element. But it'll also select more. It selects all of the things that match this selector. And so if we say dot sidebar space dot nav item, this is going to find things with a class of nav item inside a thing with a class of sidebar. So it's going to find this and this and this and all of the nav item things because they're inside sidebar. And notice they're like multiple levels down. This space is not like, it's not single level. It's like anywhere underneath a sidebar, it'll find a nav item and apply whatever you put in here. So if we apply this filter, actually we want to go a level further and only apply it to the image. So we can say sidebar nav item image. And now we're targeting images inside a nav item inside a sidebar, if that makes sense. And now you can see the images are the right color. We also want to change the text to the same color. So we'll say sidebar nav item and set their text color, which is just the color property, to whatever that color was that we had over here. Ooh. Paste that. Nice. All right. Yeah, the recording is going to be available. It'll be at this same URL. Just come back to this page and it'll be a video instead of a live stream. So get rid of that. We've got a little bit of progress here. Everything's all jumbled. So let's space this out properly and kind of put things where they're supposed to be. So we need this cloud IO thing to have, actually this whole box has padding. You can see like everything is kind of the same distance from the left side. If you like draw a little line here, you can see the same kind of thing on the right. There's this consistent gap. And actually in the design, they're not quite consistent, but we're going to pretend they are and just make them the same. So what we could do is apply, instead of applying spacing to each of these elements, we can apply spacing to the container. And then each of the elements is kind of like unaware of what size it needs to be. It just takes up whatever size it takes up. And that's usually a good way to do things. Usually you want to kind of apply, it's the same, I guess it's like the don't repeat yourself principle. So if you can avoid like having to duplicate sizes in a bunch of places, it'll make it way easier to change that size later if you only have it in one place. So for the sidebar, we're going to give it a padding of 20 pixels, I think. Maybe more than that, maybe like 30. I don't know. What size is it actually? Measure this. It's, yeah, closer to 40 actually. Okay. Close enough. We'll do 40. Okay, so that pulls everything down, and then we need to space stuff up vertically. So usually, there's always multiple ways to do stuff in CSS. If you need a space between this logo and this line here, this like nav item thing, you could either apply, you can apply margin to the logo to push everything down. So we could say, do we have a class for logo yet? Nope. Dot logo. We could say margin bottom is, say, 40 pixels. And that didn't do anything. Oh, because, yeah, so image elements are, there's a display property. I inspect this thing. I guess it's kind of not shown, huh? Computed. No, yeah, display inline. So there's a difference between inline elements and block elements. Block elements have like get their own line. Basically, they push other stuff down. Inline stuff is like text and will stay on the same line. And for inline elements, they can't have margin and padding. I think they can have like side to side margin, but they can't have top and bottom. So we can make the logo display block. That will allow the margin to come through, except it didn't work. Why didn't that work? That's fun. Did it not apply? Oh, doesn't have a logo class. Class equals logo. Nice. All right. Thanks, Dave. Yeah, you can also do a BR. Yeah, so there's lots of ways to do this. So we can push it down with margin. We could use padding, which would have the same visual effect, except that, yeah, there's a difference in that like margins collapse, but padding doesn't. And we can also put the margin or padding on this element. So I think in deciding this, I usually try to push stuff like down and right. I think other people do different ways, but it's, if you're consistent about it, it'll make it a lot easier to figure out like, okay, I want to push this element. Things generally flow down the page and to the right, at least in, like right to left, left to right reading languages. Yeah, so if you're consistent about that, it'll just make it easier to figure out like where to put margins and paddings and stuff, and try to make things a little more independent maybe. So I'm going to put it on the bottom of the cloud logo and then on the bottom of every element to push things down. So we'll go into nav item and we'll give these a margin bottom of just something, and we'll figure out what that actually is over here. Something like 45. Let's say 45. Cool. All right. We've got to space out the image from the text. So let's do that. So inside nav item, we have an image. So we need to find some way of like adding space between these things. And we've got this image element, so we can add some space to the right of it. So in this image here, we can say margin right is, say, 20 pixels or something. That'll work. Actually might be right. Not that. Nope. Boy. Maybe it's like 25. Whatever. It looks right. Yeah. I think we'll go with 20. The other thing about the design is that the icon and the text are like centered vertically. And right now you can see they're bottom aligned. We don't want that. So we can fix that by using Flexbox. If we make each of these nav items display flex, well, at first it's going to throw everything to the top and to the left, so it kind of squishes things top left. But we can then align the items vertically with align items center. That'll align them center. So the two alignment properties in Flexbox are align items and justify content. And it's always confusing to remember like which one does which. Honestly, just you can try both and one of them will work. So in the default direction of Flexbox, which is flex direction row, by default things stack in a line and then they'll wrap like normal text will. That's flex direction row. So in that default, I like to think of justify as like the justify buttons in a text editor. So I have like text edit or something. This has justify buttons, right? No. Hold on. Over here, text edit. So these little buttons up here, right? Like push the text to the left, center it, push it right, justify. So that's what the justify content attribute does. It pushes stuff left, center, or right. And then align items is the other direction. To make things extra confusing, when you switch flex direction, so you can either stack stuff side to side or you can stack it top to bottom. If we change this to column, that's going to stack things top to bottom. And now the align items and justify content do the opposite. So yeah, that's fun. A lot of times I just stick with flex direction row anyway, and that's fine. We don't want justify content center. We're going to leave it all left aligned. Do you find in most current projects setting the main layout with grid and then inner flow with flex? Yeah, I think that's a decent way to go. I've heard it described that way. Like Flexbox is good for small things and grid is good for bigger layout stuff. I don't know. I haven't actually used grid as much as Flexbox yet. Like I'm still kind of learning grid, honestly. I'm more comfortable with Flexbox for sure. So a lot of times I'll default to that. Yeah, if you want to use, I think grid is good for like 2-dimensional layouts. So, and like things like this where you've got the gaps, like grid has that nice grid gap property. It takes care of it. So speaking of that, where did our gap go? We used to have a gap here. Interesting. How about, yeah, why not use Flexbox and space around the nav items? We could do that too. Yeah, like I was saying, there's lots of ways to solve this problem. We could make nav a flex container and then do space around vertically. Is that what you're saying? That would work too. Yep. There's lots of ways. There's always more than one way to solve a problem in CSS. So let's I think this is decent. Pretty close. We need to do this active thing. We'll come back to that in a second. We've got this little border here and then stuff down the bottom. So let's put in this bottom content and move on. I'm going to copy and paste things here in the interest of time. So underneath nav, we've got these little actions with a bunch of items, upload stuff, new folder, and a button. And we'll need a border between them. But just to get stuff in place, I can do this. And then what do we want to do? So these things need to be pushed down to the bottom of this sidebar. And they need to stay, I think they need to stay pinned down here. There's nothing really, there's no guidance in the design about that, but I would assume if you resize the window top to bottom, you'd probably want this to kind of, stay where it is, the same distance from the bottom, and come up and then stop at this border. So we don't want it to be like this. If I close the dev tools, we don't want this to be kind of like right up against the nav items. So let's give nav that bottom border, say sidebar nav, or we could just target nav by itself. That, yeah. Depends on what you want to do. I usually try to avoid targeting elements by themselves, just because like more likely to reuse elements, and then your styles might apply places you don't want them to. So trying to scope it, increase the specificity by saying like nav elements inside a sidebar keeps things a little more kind of readable too. So we give this thing a border bottom. 1 pixel solid something. I'll just use CCC for gray, and we have a border. It's not in the right place, but we do have a border. Let's figure out what that color is actually supposed to be. We get this very light gray, or light whatever, very close to that color. And it doesn't go all the way across. We'll talk about that in a second. Let's fix the actions and push those down. So yeah, Hugo. Yeah, Flex is preferred for one-dimensional row or column layouts, and grid is better for multi-dimensional stuff. Yep. Definitely good for grids. We've got a grid in the middle of this design. We can use grid on this thing. We've also still lost our, sorry, this monitor is like not great at colors, but we still don't have our little gap anymore. Not sure what happened to that. Let's try just regular grid gap and bring it back. Not sure why that's missing. Anyone knows why the column's missing? It definitely was working. I wonder if maybe I like forgot to close an element or something. Got nav closing here. We've got sidebar closed here. Looks reasonable. Not sure. Yeah, you can use both. People use both for both. It's true. Like unlike the JavaScript world where like the new thing always like supplants, like replaces the old one, CSS Grid doesn't replace Flexbox. Like they coexist. They're kind of for different things, and in a lot of cases they're interchangeable, so you can kind of use whatever works. Yeah. Browser support wise, Flexbox is a little bit better right now, but Grid is like well supported. If you check out caniuse.com, you can go and type in Grid. And so like, yeah, pretty much most browsers support level 1. IE of course is like lagging somehow. Subgrid is like not supported anywhere yet except Firefox. Anyway, yeah. See, CaniUse is great for being sure if you can use things. Flexbox is more green. Yeah, IE still has this kind of partial support thing, but it's a little bit better. But they're both ready for use though. Definitely feel free to use both, as long as you don't need to support like old IE. Right, so let's push this thing down. What did I do before? Yeah, so we could use, I think Flexbox is probably the way to go here. So we have a thing here, and we want this to be like always pushed down to the bottom. We might be able to use margin without that. I'm not totally sure about this. I don't think I tried this, but let's see what happens. If I say like sidebar actions, and I give it a margin top of auto. We'll make the margin as big as it can. And no, that doesn't work. Okay, so I think it has to be a flex container to make that work. So let's make sidebar a flex container. We'll say display flex. And ooh, that's fun. So remember I said the default direction is row, so it stacks stuff left to right. So we've got that logo here and this stuff, and then kind of crammed in the rest of the stuff over here. So we definitely want that to go vertically. So we're gonna set flex direction to column and go this way. The logo's still weird, but hey, this is working now. Because of the margin top. So if we get rid of the margin top, it's gonna stack right in here. But if we put in a margin top of auto, auto is just like use as much space as you can. So it takes up everything from here on down. And if I were to resize this, or I guess like open up DevTools, you'll see that like that thing now moves, and it eventually it stops there, but yeah, neat. Okay, so let's fix this. Yeah, we gotta fix the logo. That's odd. So when you apply Flexbox, the default is that it stretches everything across the container. So it's putting stuff vertically top to bottom, but it's every element is like taking up full width. And if we look at this, we can see like inside sidebar. Oh, this is what happened to the padding. The thing is like oddly wide. Oh, I know why. All right, so we'll talk about that too. Right, so anyway, so this image, you can see they're all kind of like as wide as the container, even though the container is like hidden behind here right now. If we set the logo to not be stretched, so when we could set everything to not stretch, but we kind of want these ones to be full width. We just want to affect the logo and push it over to the left. So we can set this to, we can use align self, and we can give it flex start, which will give it to like push it to the left. Flex end would be far right. And so our far right border is chopped off. And that's because, I think it's because we've got, we have a fixed width of this thing on this element. Actually, we don't need this width anymore. Oh, maybe that's why it was. Yes, we had a width of 220 inside a grid container, so it was setting it to be kind of like overflow the container. The other thing that what I thought was going to happen with this is that we need to apply box sizing, border box. Let's see if this fixes it too. Yeah, cool. So box sizing, when you set the width of an element, it tries to make the inner content be that width, and it doesn't take into account like margin and stuff. So like the actual width is way bigger. If you set the box sizing to border box, and the star selector will do it for every single element on the page, then all of them will kind of do what you expected them to do in the first place, probably. Like when you say 220 and you give it a padding of 40, you still mean like it's 220. You don't want it to be 220 plus 80 or whatever. Yeah, so box sizing border box will fix that. And also we don't need this width on the sidebar because the grid is doing it for us. Neat. And now we've got our gap back again. And this bottom thing still works, but it doesn't look very good yet. So let's fix that. So it needs a little kind of a gray box around it. We need to change the color of the text and the icons, and we've got to do something about this button down here. So let's give the actions their little background. We can see where the box is right now. Just give it some color, and we'll figure out what the color's actually supposed to be in here. Get 46 something. Okay, so color, that's what we want. So we need to kind of space these things out from the inside edge there, which means we need padding. So we can give it maybe 20 pixels of padding. Maybe 15 pixels of padding. Okay. And we want the edges to be rounded, so we can use border radius and give them some sort of rounded corner. Let's say like 10 pixels to start off with. That seems decent. I think this might be a little bit bigger, but yeah, we could do 10, we could do 15. But that's pretty close. And we need to space out the icons. We need to make little icons a little bit smaller too. So let's do sidebar actions icon. What do we get? These are like action items. So we could say actions item and target the image inside the actions items. And make these things smaller. I think maybe like 18 pixels was a good size. 18. Yeah, that's pretty good. Smaller than those ones. Actually, these ones are too big, so we can set the size on those too. Go back up to where we had nav item image and set these also to 18 by 18. I think that's a bit better. Or maybe they should be 20. I don't know, not sure. Better square around them. 19, 18. Yeah, 18. Seems reasonable. Do I typically set any other resets for the whole project? Yeah, so I would Google like CSS reset. And there's a bunch of these things. Kind of just like pick one that you, I don't know. There's always like the new best CSS reset. I don't think it really matters too much. Just pick one of them and go with something you like. I saw another cool thing like MVP.css on Hacker News today. Yeah, I think it was this one. So it's like, it's more than a reset, but it like basically just gives you minimal style sheet for everything. This is pretty cool. Google MVP.css. But anyway, yeah, so yeah, I typically like, actually, honestly, I usually reset things as I need them. I probably should just like copy and paste a reset, but a lot of times I just kind of like run into things. I'm like, oh, the lists have bullets, and I don't want the lists to have bullets, and I'll go and reset them or something. But yeah, it would be more efficient if I copied and pasted a reset. So let's give this stuff some color. Use color for the font color, and then it's brighter than this one. I'll pull this out of here and use that there. Okay, good. And then the icons need to be filtered again. And so the filter, it actually might, it needs to be brighter. Yeah. Let me see if I can find whatever I used for the original filter. Actions item image. Yeah, it's decent. We also want to space them out from the side a little bit, so we can give them like a margin right of maybe 5 pixels or something. And maybe we need our little centering trick too, so we can make them make the actions item be display flex. We can align items to the center. Yeah, neat. Except they're all crushed together now. So let's give them some margin bottom of a few pixels or something. It's okay. Okay, that's close. That's close. Yeah. So except that so when I did that margin, we've got margin on all 4 of them now. And if you look in DevTools, you can see like hover over these. So the orange is the margin and the blue is the content. So we've got margin, 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 margin. We don't really want it on the last one because it like makes the space at the bottom bigger than it should be. So we can apply this only to the first few if we use kind of this nice plus selector trick. If we say actions item plus actions item, this is going to target yeah, it'll target these items after another item. So if we're looking at this list here, it wouldn't target the first one, but it'll target the second one because it's like one next to another one. Item next to item, or adjacent. I think it's adjacent selector. So we'll have to change how we do the margin, but we can apply it only to the last three. So we can apply it to the top of them. Oops. Apply it to the top of each of those last three. So now this one has a margin on the top, and this one has a top margin, and this one has a top margin, but the first one doesn't. And so then our spacing is right inside the box. It's one way to do that. You can also use like the first child selector or last child to target that last element and override the margin, but this works out well. So now we've got to do the button. I think I'm going to skip this little caret thingy. You can Google how to do a CSS triangle. There's a way to do this with like borders. Let's style this button. So what do we give it? Yeah, it's a create button. Let's call it create button. And we've got kind of two elements in the button. There's this create new text, and then there's a little plus on the right. And so the one I pasted in here doesn't have the plus. So we could make a div or span or something that has that plus in it. But it's kind of like not part of the document. It's sort of more of a decoration than actually part of the text, I think. So we can use some CSS tricks to insert some content alongside the create new text. Let's give this thing some. We'll give it a background of this orangey color, whatever this is. FFA background. Whoa. Let me get rid of DevTools for a sec. Okay, so now we got the right color background, but the color is, I think is it white? Yeah, okay. So in terms of like accessibility, this is not a great color for this thing because like contrast wise, it is super hard to read. See, Chrome will tell you sometimes. Why can't I click these anymore? I'm not sure why I can't click these anymore. No, now I can. Sometimes Chrome will give you hints about the accessibility of that color, and it'll give you a little contrast checker thing. I don't know why it doesn't always show up though. If anyone knows, drop a message in the chat, because this is weird. Sometimes it's, anyway, yeah, sometimes it'll tell you like this thing is a good contrast or it's not. I think this is probably too close, so we could either darken the button to make it easier to read, or we could darken the text. And if we wanted to make the text like sort of orange but dark, we can sample the orange that we have and then kind of just drag this slider down until it's like, hey, look, there's like a dark orangey color. That's one way to solve that. And then of course, don't forget to paste it into your CSS file, otherwise it'll get lost. Okay. We also don't want this thing to have a border. Buttons come with a border by default, so we can just say border none, and then get rid of this. It will be, borderless. And we do want some rounded edges on it. Do border radius. So you can apply border radius even though it has no border. It'll just apply it to like the shape of the element. So we could say like maybe a 10 pixel border radius or something, or maybe 5. We also need to pad it out a bit, so we'll give some padding. I don't know, maybe 10 pixels of padding or something. That looks close-ish. I think the font is kind of small. So actually, yeah, the font is kind of small and the font is wrong. So one annoying thing with fonts, if you apply font family to body or like any parent element, the way CSS works, this is going to affect everything under that element. So all the child elements of body and like their descendants and such will have this font family and this font size, and certain properties will cascade throughout the document. But font family and font size and stuff don't apply to buttons and inputs and things like that. So we can make this is another thing that probably a good CSS reset will do for you. But we can say body, button, and input will get the font that we want. And then we can get rid of this. You could also do star and just select like every element and apply these things. I noticed if you do this, then it will like have a set font family and a set font size on every, like even just a div. And then so you've got to override it when you want it to be a different size. And it was a little, like it broke the cascading. Like parents having a new font size wouldn't apply to their children. So I wouldn't use the star selector for that. Just target the things you want to override. So we've got that. We need some margin. And remember, I was going to do like pushing everything down. Let's just push the actions. We'll push the button away from the actions. We'll give the actions a margin. So sidebar actions, margin bottom is going to be 20 or something. And I'll space it out a bit. Neat. Let's do that little plus inside the button. So like I was saying, we could add an element here. We make a span that has a little plus and, you know, style it up. That's one way to do it. We can also use a fake element, create button. If we use the colon after pseudo element, pseudo class, I think it's a pseudo element. There's a specific name for this. I don't know. Anyway, so if you use colon after, it'll create an element inside the document. If I save it, maybe not. Here, let's give it some content. So these things are, by default, they're just kind of there, but they don't show up unless you give them some kind of content, even if it's empty. So this is just like empty string as a content. And now you can see that this button has create new and then this colon after thing. Maybe this is supposed to be colon after. Both of them work. Neat. Yeah, the colon and colon thing is another, like, a lot of times they work with one or both. Anyway, so we can use this little element to have our plus. So we could give it, content is a plus sign. Maybe I can put this like on the right or something. It's not in a good spot right now. Okay. Pseudo, yeah. Yeah, so there's like pseudo classes and pseudo elements, I think. I think this is a pseudo element. Anyway, so we've got our plus, and we can, because it's a regular element, so we can style it. We can give it a background of some like lighter color, whatever this like light orange was. We can figure out what this is. Use that. We have our light orange. We can give it some padding, or maybe just give it a width and height. Width is 20 pixels, height 20 pixels. Needs to be display block, so we can set its width. Yep. and now it's gonna, because it's display block, it makes a new line for itself. So we can fix that. We're gonna need to like space things out anyway, so we can use Flexbox to space out the stuff inside this button. If we make the button display flex, and that's gonna cram things next to each other again. So now we have our say width and height is 20, maybe it should be 25, a little bit bigger. I don't know. But we need to center the plus inside there so we can set the display, or not display, yeah, display. Set flex. No. Display flex. Yeah, display flex. So flex is also block. There's also an inline flex that will behave like an inline element. So it'll take care of both of those things. Is there a benefit to using the pseudo element versus creating the plus directly in the HTML file? Yeah. So I think that the benefit of using the pseudo element, I think, is that the text of this button is create new. You know, like if you were going to read it, you wouldn't say create new plus. I feel like the plus it's almost like an icon. Like you wouldn't read the icon. And if like a screen reader was reading this, it would read create new. You could do, I think you could hide it from a screen reader if you wanted to just put the element in there. But I feel like, yeah, I don't know. Things that are just like just presentational, I would tend to use the little pseudo element, but you can do it either way. Either way will work. Sometimes this is useful. So this trick is also useful if you're totally outside the scope of like creating designs from CSS. But if you're doing like CSS that like modifies existing sites, like if you're making like a grease monkey script or tamper monkey or whatever that utility is, you can make like custom style sheets and stuff where you don't control the HTML. Creating new elements this way can be super helpful if you want to like inject things. But anyway, I hope that was somewhat useful. So we've got our, yeah, what do we have display flex, and we need to align items in the center, which will give us vertical centering, and then we need to justify content in the center, which will give us horizontal centering. And then we also need to do all the same stuff to the button itself because, well, at least we want to align stuff. Oops. Align stuff vertically centered here. And now we just need to space stuff out. So let me see. So Flexbox, we can set the size of the text. Actually, so we have to be able to target it. So if we wrap this in a span, oh, I already did this. Sorry. So instead of just having the text inside the button, so right, totally glossed over this. If we had the button like this, we couldn't just like target the text. But if we have it wrapped in a span, we can target the text itself. And then we can say that the create button text should be flex 1. And this will make it take up as much space as it possibly can. Because if I comment that out, you can see it's like all crammed over to the left. If you set flex 1, this 1 is similar to that 1FR thing in grids. So it's like one fraction of the available space, and because this is the only thing declaring a number, it's just like I take all this space and just push everything out of the way. So the button is over to the right, and this create new text is like centered between the two things. And I say centered, it's not quite centered, and I'm not sure why it's not centered. There's some padding somewhere or something that it's centering it between the padding over here and the thing over here. So we could adjust it by like maybe removing the padding on the left. Am I on the right thing here? Create button. Padding left, nothing. And that'll space it out better. Cool. So that's our button. I think the sidebar is mostly done. Oh, so this border, if you can see it, I can barely see it on my monitor, but the border doesn't go all the way across here, and it's supposed to go all the way across. And remember, we gave the sidebar its own padding, so that we could only do it in one place and avoid, duplication. But that means that everything inside there has to be is padded in. So we could either make the border wider somehow, or we can change how we're applying those sizes. So one way to do that would be to go over sidebar padding. One way to do this would be to go to every element and apply a margin left and right and space them in. That's kind of a pain, and if you ever want to change it, you've got to go change it in all those places, and that sucks. So instead of that, we can say sidebar and use the greater than selector. This is children of sidebar. This is direct descendants of sidebar. And we can say everything. So this is every single element that is directly under sidebar. So it'll be the image and the nav, not any of these divs, but it will be this div and the button. So we can use the star selector there, and we can set the padding, or maybe margin actually. Margin left and right. We can either do margin left and margin right on those. And it should space them out, except that didn't work. So we do still need top and bottom margin on the sidebar, or padding rather. Top 40, bottom 40. And that solves that, but it is, these things are not still, oh, right, because the border is, yeah, okay. The border is on the nav, and the nav is not full width. So instead of using margin on these things, if we use padding, that'll add the space inside the element instead of around it, which actually works great for this and not well for these. So maybe my idea here is not going to work in this one spot. Sometimes this works, but I think for this, we probably want to apply it individually. So we can condense this down to padding 0, 40. So just shorthand. So top and bottom will be 40, or top and bottom will be 0, sorry. And then left and right will be 40. That would do the same thing. And we can take this out of here and apply it to the nav. And then we also need to apply the margin actually to both of these. So we'll find our actions. We can give it margin. We already have a bunch of margin things. We've got top and bottom. So we could, we need left to be 40 and we need right to be 40. Which will pull it in, but so we have literally all 4 margins here. We can condense these into shorthand. So we can specify all 4 values as top, right, bottom, and left, or treble. It's a good way to remember that. So for the top, we want this to be auto. For the right, we're going to go 40. Bottom is 20, and left is 40. And it's the same. Now we can delete all that. And one more thing for the button. So we need the button to have its own margin, only left and right. So top and bottom will be 0, and left and right can be 40, and we'll put it in like that. Cool. Now the logo is terrible. Why not apply it to sidebar? Yeah, so this is what we had before. If we apply it to the sidebar, then this border can't go all the way across. Yeah, that's the reason. So there are other ways to work around that. You could make the border its own element. You could make it like position absolute and like slide it over to the left. Yeah. Lots of ways to solve that, but yeah. Let's figure out why. Oh, so we haven't dealt with the logo at all. Margin bottom is fine. Align cell flex start. I'm not sure why that was flipped around, but we'll do margin left 40. Space that out. Yeah, I'm sort of unhappy about having to apply that to everything. And thinking back, it might be easier to make the border its own little like 1 pixel element, and then have it just like be full width by making a position absolute. But yeah, you can try that. Give that a shot. I think it'd probably be easier. So sidebar is done. Done-ish. Yeah, no, it's done. Sidebar is good. Except this little active thing. But we're already like 1 hour and 10 minutes in, and I don't want to take up your whole day here. So I'm thinking maybe, I don't know, does anyone want to keep going? Do you want to stop here? Happy to keep going, but I could also just post the solution and call it. While the chat takes time to catch up, I will keep going. Let me know what you think. If you want to keep going, let me know. If not, also let me know. So sidebar is good. Oh, the active thing. Yeah, why don't we do the active thing? We've already got the active class, right? Keep going. Cool. Okay. Yeah, why not? All right, let's do sidebar nav item active. Okay. So we're already going with sidebar nav item. So we want to target. So this selector is saying nav items with the active class. So when you combine class selectors like this, just like separating by dots but not with spaces, then this is targeting elements that have both nav item and active, which is going to be like this, actually just this one. So we can say its color is going to be white, so it'll make the text white. And we can target the image inside that same thing and do our little filter trick to get this white as well. I'm just going to copy this from here. Sweet. And the other thing is that we need a little spacer thingy. So we could do spacer thingy. Yeah, so we need this little like white border thing. So it's kind of like a border. We could do border left, but it would just be like a rectangle. If we want these inner edges, we kind of need to make it its own element. And so this is another place where I think this is like totally a presentational thing, and making an element in the HTML for it seems a little weird. And I can use like the before pseudo class and create this thing. Yeah, feel like you're missing some CSS magic by hacking away at it. Yeah, that's kind of how it goes. I feel like the hacks get more elegant as you gain experience, and you're able to like do more in the CSS file before you save and refresh, and it tends to come out better. Um, but yeah, there's definitely an element of like, well, there's multiple ways to solve this thing. How do I want to do it here? Um, and certainly smarter people than me have like good, well thought through reasons for why they do certain things certain ways. And I've got some of those, but some things I'm just like, it works. So we're just gonna do it this way. Um, let's see. So we got our active thing. Oh yeah, so active, we need to use a pseudo element for this one. So I'm gonna copy this same selector, make a before this time, because we do want it to go on the left, and I think before is gonna be easier to deal with than after. So we need to give it some content so that it can be on the page. We need to give it a height, which we want it to take up the whole height of this one element. So it's going to be 100% of its parent. We'll give it a width of like 5 pixels and a background of white so we can see what it's doing. And it's not doing anything, so that's cool. What's up with that? Or here, before, yeah, it's there, but it's just not doing anything. Just not visible. What if we make it like 100 pixels wide? Do anything? That's cool. Yeah, so it's there. It's just not. Maybe the background color isn't. It has a height and a width. I don't know. Well, we wanted to make it position absolute anyway, so let's do that. Position absolute. Absolute. Oh, nice. All right. Oh, yeah. Maybe that's what was going on. So, it's position absolute. It is. Let's make it 5 pixels again, like it's supposed to be. But it's taking up the whole height of like the parent element. So when you make something absolute, it takes it out of the layout, so you can see it's not taking up any space inside this box anymore, or any boxes. It's just kind of like superimposed there. But it also, its position is now relative to its like closest positioned parent. So let me explain what that means. So if you've got this nav item active before, so the thing is like right here, right? We make it absolute. It's going to look up the tree until it finds the nearest positioned thing, which I think in this case is nav or sidebar. I'm not sure why it's 100%. Like, it's not the full height. Anyway, it's not what we want it to be. So what we want it to do is have its height relative to the nav item. And we can fix that by making nav item positioned. So if we make it position relative, it will not change anything about the nav item, but it will fix that little active thingy. And now it's like constrained to its nearest positioned parent. So we can make its like left. So we know how far this border is. So we can say it's, oops, wrong thing. Here we go. We want to move it over to the left by like 40 pixels. So we'll shove it over there. We can give it a border top right radius of 5 pixels. So you can do border radius, which would do like all of them. Actually, that might be fine here because half of it's invisible. No, maybe not. Border top radius. Top doesn't do anything. Okay, so it's top right. And we want bottom right. So border bottom right radius 5. That'll give us our little thing. And it's not the right height. It's actually constrained by Yeah, 100% should refer to the container. So 100%, it is now 100% of its container, because its container is relative, but it's also not as high as I was hoping it would be. Oh, because I'm not sure actually. We've got the space, but these things don't have any padding, I guess. So when I did this before, I guess I had padding instead of margin. So because the margin is outside the box, this thing is only, as high as the text basically. So we could change the way the nav items are laid out. So if instead we use margin bottom, if we make this padding bottom is going to make it, well, actually that works. Oh yeah, padding bottom works because I'm not sure why that works. It's interesting that it's centered. I guess Flexbox is centering the thing, and it's absolute, and it's off to the left. That's great. So hey, it's done. That worked. It's kind of tall. Maybe 40 is not the right size, but 45 or whatever. But it's pretty good. Okay. All right, let's move on to the middle section. Get out of this sidebar. So I'm gonna copy in a bunch of code because this is a lot of stuff, and we're already low on time. I don't really want to spend forever typing things in, so I'll just copy this, paste into content, plop, content. All right. Tab this in. Okay, now we have lots of faces and more stuff, but it all looks real bad. So let's work on making it look more like this. So we have a search bar along the top. We've got to style this input, and then we've got these sections that have like a title and these little project cards. The title. So as I'm looking at this, I'm thinking like we have an input that's its own box, right? So we can use the input and just style the input as is. We have this title that has a thing next to it. So that to me says like this is going to need to have, it's going to need to be like a flex container or something with like one thing pushed off to the right and then the title off to the left. And then we've got these project cards, and I think Flexbox is probably a good case here because they can wrap or whatever, right? They're just kind of like left to right boxes. Within the boxes, we can try using grid because this is kind of like a grid. We've got this row here with the folder and the people, and we've got this row here with the title, and then another row for this created date. And then there's this kind of like wildcard little, action icon or whatever that we could just kind of position absolute and throw it in the corner. This is the same kind of thing, title with some stuff to the right of it. And then we've got this table. So my first stab at this was using like an HTML table, because I think if you have a table, you may as well use a table. I think tables for layout are not a good idea, but tables for tables are fine. But it's got these spaces between the rows, and my initial stab at like trying to add margin to the bottom of rows didn't work. I think tables have like their own special styling rules and stuff. And they can be kind of hard to work with. So there might be a way to make it work, but it didn't work in the first 5 minutes I was trying it. So I gave up on that and I went to grid. So we can try using CSS grid for this. And then we've got another kind of like title with some project cards. And hopefully steal some of the style from up here. So let's work on just kind of go top to bottom, I guess, work on the input first. We have our input just like inside this div up here. Below my notes. And so we've got, yeah, it's got a class of search, so we can target it instead of just targeting like every input or whatever. Can put this under content, leave some middle content. Comments help to figure out where we are and stuff. So we'll make a thing that targets search. We'll make it display flex because it's gonna have some stuff inside. It's gonna have this little icon. It already has the placeholder text for search. That's good. We want it to take up the full width of this thing, so you can set its width to 100%. Inputs, for whatever reason, don't take up 100%, even though I think they're block elements, but they don't take up the full width. Anyway, we're making it take up the full width. We're gonna pad the text a little bit to kind of move, give it some space around the text. And we need to fit that little icon over here. So we're gonna put some padding on the left, not there. Try it in the CSS file. We put some padding on the left that's bigger, so it'll shift over the placeholder and leave kind of like some empty space. So when you start typing, it'll be to the right of whatever we've got here. We also, I think we don't have a border. Border is none, but it's kind of inset and stuff. So we can give this whole content area some padding. Let's do that. Give this padding 20. That'll shift everything in a little bit. That's cool. So yeah, no border, but we do want a border radius of something, I don't know, 10 pixels, whatever. Maybe less than that. It's kind of a lot. Maybe like 8. I don't know. Yeah, it actually looks a little bit taller, but it's close. Cool. And then so we can use getting this element in here. This is another thing. There's a few ways to do this. We could use we could wrap the input in a tag, and we could put the we could like wrap it in a div or something. And if we made this div position relative, then we could position absolute stuff inside it, right? So then we could add our little image here and make it images/search and do it that way. So we could try this. Search box, I guess. I don't know. We need something else. It's not just search. Huh? Search box. If we make this if we don't make this position relative, if we say search box image and we make it position absolute, this is gonna actually it's good because until you reposition it, it doesn't move. So maybe that's fine. It would be safer though to make the search box be relative. It shouldn't really change anything, but that'll keep it right. So now we've got the absolute positioned image, and we can set its height to something smaller, probably, or its width to the same width. Maybe not actually. It's kind of the right size. I don't know. That makes this. Yeah. Try zooming in. This is very small. All right, 16 by 16. Cool. Make that 16. And then we have it positioned absolutely. We need to pull it down. Ideally center it, but so we can't, even though it's inside a, actually, even if we made this a flex container, I don't think we can center things with that. But maybe we can. Align, items, center. That works. Nice. That's cool. So that applies to the absolute element. Yay. And then we want to pull it over from the left, maybe like 10 pixels or something. So these, once you have a position absolute thing, you can use top, bottom, left, and right, you know, to shift it around from its original position. So this is 10 pixels from its like current left. So if I save this, it'll move 10 pixels over to the right. Yeah, 10 pixels from the left. And there we go. Got our little search box. Good enough. Let's move on. Right. Huge zoom level. We've got this title thing here and some icons. So for this, I'm using a header element. So this entire section is a header, content header, and it's got the actual heading, the recently used text, but it's also got this header actions div, so we can put it next to the title and everything. So let's do that. We'll say content header, and we need to put this stuff to the right of the header, so we'll make it display flex. Flex, cool. It's already kind of there, but we want to put all that stuff over to the right, so we could say content header, header actions. Actually, no, we've only got two things here, so we can use space between and it'll do it well. So what am I thinking here? Align, justify content, right? So we want to go, we're in flex direction row, we want to go side to side, and to use justify content and set this to space between, and that'll kind of distribute things evenly. But since we've only got two, it's just going to push them to opposite sides. Cool. And then we got to style this a bit. Let's do something about that. So, oops. So in the header actions button, so these things are actually buttons. They've got images, and they've got this span that says what they are. So this is really for screen readers. If you've got icon buttons, it's good to have a span in there that describes what the button actually does, but you don't want it to show up. So I'm going to paste in a screen reader only class. So the SR only is for. I'm going to put it at the top because it's kind of a generic thing. And I got this from this place here. This is linked from the GitHub repo. Cool, thanks Maria. Yeah, all right, so that's hidden the text now, and then we can style the buttons the rest of the way. So header actions. We don't want them to have a border. And we want the background. The background is like white right now. We want the background to be transparent so that they don't, so they just kind of blend in like this. Let me get rid of that square. And we also they are at the top of this right now. So we want to align all the stuff in this flex container to the center. That'll pull those down. And we're kind of pretty much there. It would be nice if they were a little bit more muted, so we can say their opacity is maybe 0.8, maybe 6, something like that. That's pretty good. Yeah, I think that's all right. These buttons are, so if we click on them, you can see that the icon is kind of at the top of the button. It would be cool if the icon was centered. So we can make the buttons themselves display flex and align items center Oh, so right. So if I make them flex, then they're a block and they get their own lines. So we're gonna make this inline flex instead, and they'll stay side to side. And now the icons are centered vertically. Sweet. I guess just for safety's sake, we could throw in the justify content center. I don't think we need it here because I think the buttons just kind of expand to be as the size of their input, size of the thing inside, but good. All right, so that's decent. This color is, I don't know. Let's figure it out. Take like the darkest part of it. So that's this heading here, and it's an H2, I think, right? Make this H2. Recently used. Recent files. Recently used H2. Yeah, so we're just gonna apply this color to like all headings. We'll say H2 as a color of that. That looks a little better. Also bold though. Let's make the weight something, maybe 600. I think it'll be like bold-ish, but not bold. Maybe 400. I thought this font had an in between. Okay, never mind, 400. Let's also make it a bit bigger. I'll make it like 1.8 rem. Sure. And 1.4 rem. It's pretty big. So 1.4, if you're using rem, it's a multiple of the like base font size, which is 14 here. So it'll be like 14 times 1.4. It's like 19.6, maybe 20 pixels or something. And that way, if we adjusted the base font size, everything else would kind of scale along with it. So, okay, let's go down to the next section. Let's do these little project card things. So these things are in a element called projects, I think, right? So we have a section that is for projects. We can make the make the projects be projects display flex. So they all display flex. So this will throw them all together in a line. And the images are still way too big, but at least they're kind of like, they're closer to where they're supposed to be. So the individual project, this is like each of the project divs inside here. We want to give these things like a background and a rounded edges and all this kind of stuff. But we're going to make them display grid. Just talking about how these are kind of like grids. But we have to lay out the grid a bit here. We can't just kind of let the browser do what it wants. So we mouse over one of these, we can see where the grid lines are, and it decided, so by default, it'll just give everything its own row, which is nice, but that's not what we want. So let's modify that. So we're going to do grid template rows to decide how big the rows are. And I'm going to use 60 pixels for the top. So this thing is like 60-ish, right? Yeah, could say it's like 60. If we make some padding in this box, then like this is 60, and then these are kind of like the same size. So we'll say 60 pixels for this, and we'll do 2 rem, 2 rem. And that'll give us 3 separate rows. And it still looks awful, but now if we highlight a project, we should be able to see that there are, well, I guess it kind of crammed things into more rows or 3 rows. I'm not really sure what it did there. We also want to give it columns. And I'm going to do 2 columns that are each 70 pixels. Okay, now you can kind of see like stuff's overflowing, but at least the grid box looks like what we want it to. There's two big chunks at the top and then some smaller ones. So now we've got to get the elements to like go in their respective grid places. And CSS Grid has this grid template areas attribute. And we can name all of these things. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 3 times 2, 6 areas. And so we say grid template areas, and then we pass in or set a string here. We could call the first one folder and the second one participants. And we do like one string per line, 1 row per row. So we've got 3 rows. So this one will be title and also the title. And this one will be date and date again. So it's okay to give the same name to multiple boxes. It just means that when we assign an element to go into title, it's going to take both of these things. It'll be like 2 wide, 2 columns wide. Cool. It looks the same, but now the things have names. And now we can put stuff into those areas. So we can target like the project icon. Actually, before we do this, I'm going to project participants. I'm just gonna make the images a bit smaller so that we can kind of see things as they develop here. And I will copy and paste this because it's something we've seen a few times now. So we're setting a width and a height and a border radius to make them rounded. And some really subtle white border, which will be cool once we stack them. These things are kind of like shifted to the right or left and stacked, so we'll do that. Okay. What else we got? Images done-ish. Still looking terrible because we've got these unordered lists. And this is what I was saying about resets earlier. If we had reset all these ahead of time, that would have been probably great, but we didn't. And we could do that now, I guess. We could just say like, okay, we're going to say list items should not look like list items. So we're going to say list style is none, and that'll get rid of the bullets. And then the unordered lists should not have padding or margin. We want to be able to decide what those are. You can also apply this to the list items, but I think those don't have padding or margin. Yeah. Okay. Doesn't hurt to reset things that aren't there, though. Okay, so now where else? Yeah, so we're applying areas now. So we can say that the project icon actually the icon is already where it's supposed to be because it's like the first thing and it went in the first cell. We could say grid area and set the area to folder, but it won't change anything. Let's also do project participants, and this is going to go in the participants area, and it kind of already is because we're kind of going left to right here, and grid will do that for us anyway. This stuff is still a mess though, so let's set project title. We'll do that after the participant stuff. Project title. This is going to go in grid area title. And it's sort of being eaten up by that little button that's not supposed to be there. We'll get rid of that in a minute. And then called project title. Oh, it's not called project title. It's just an H3. So if we say like project H3, that'll target it. Yeah, okay, cool. So now this is taking up that whole row. And the button is still taking up somewhere it's not supposed to, but we can target the date. project created date, and this is going to be grid area date. Okay, cool. The button still like now it just took its own row. Great. Let's just if we make that position absolute, we can get it out of the flow and throw it in the top right corner. And we could probably put this into a grid somehow. Maybe it could be like its own column and it goes in the top right. That probably would have worked fine actually, but I think we'll just do the absolute thing. So for the icon, nope, not the icon, actions. We want to set the position to absolute. And because the project is not absolute, these are going to be probably no, actually it's project. It's not relative, but it is roughly in the right spot. Interesting. Maybe grid takes care of that for us. Let's find out. Let's say the top is going to be top is 0 and right is 0. So this will put 0 pixels from the top and 0 pixels from the right. And yeah, okay, no, that didn't work. Now they're all stacked on top of each other in the top right. So let's set the project to position relative. That'll contain those things. And now they're like up in the top right where they should be. And we can style up the buttons so they're not so ugly. Where is the... Yeah, all right. Project actions. Border is going to be none. And background will be transparent. That's a bit better already. Let me just like a dock this to the bottom again. That's better. Okay, and we also need that color thing. I'm just gonna copy in project actions image filter and just make these gray. Nice. So these things don't stand out very well yet, so let's give them a background of white. And we also want to give them some space. So we'll give them like a margin right of maybe 10 pixels or something. That's probably about 10. They also need the rounded edges and some padding. So let's do padding 10 and border radius 15 or something. And now these buttons look way too close to the corner. Let's move those down a bit. So instead of top 0, we'll do like top 10. Put it 10 pixels from the top. That's pretty good. So I think these things are still close together. And also these icons should be stacked. So, project participants, thank you. Yay. Actually, no. Fix the typo, broke the layout. What did I do? Oh yeah, because this is also wrong. Participants. Yeah, there we go. Thank you. Awesome. Let's pull these. So these things are supposed to be stacked. This is like project participants images. If we make them it display flex, what did I do about this before? We can make them display inline, but we're just gonna do it to the list items themselves, because one of these things has like this little +3, which is not an image, so we don't want to do it to the images, to style the images to be stacked. We want the list items to be stacked. So in the list items, we can set display to inline block which will put them all in a line. And then we can give them a negative left margin to shift them all over to the left. And they stack up okay. And then we have to style the +3 because it's its own thing. So I'm going to copy and paste that because it's kind of a large chunk of little fiddly things that set the width and height and such. It's okay, except it's the wrong color. Why is it gray? Background. That's actually good. Where's our more participants +3? Let's look at that. More participants +3 has a border that's gray. That's fine. What's its computed properties? Maybe it has like a color that's gray for some reason. Borders, color is black. That's good. Maybe background. Background looks reasonable. It's white. What's up with that? Is it just like a DevTools thing? Oh, it's a DevTools thing, I guess. Never mind. Right. Right, that's good. Spacing on these things isn't 100% great. We could if we center the text in both of these, then that'll probably be better. So let's go down to the H3. We're gonna say align self. So these align self works inside Flexbox and in grid. So we can say center. That'll put that in the center of its little box, and we can align self to center on the date as well, and maybe give this some muted color like it has in the design. That's pretty good. Yeah, all right. Let's go on to the next section. I think we're close. Did I miss anything? Not quite. Yeah, these colors are a little bit off, but we'll just move on. So recent files should already look okay because we have the styles applied to all the headers, and that is one of the headers. That looks decent. This link is kind of bit jarring, so we can reset that. So other sort of reset things. We could just apply don't really have any other links in the document. It's in like a real app, you would have links. You'd probably want to think a little harder before you color all of them the same and take away their text decoration. But in this case, we'll just do it to all of them. That'll be our default link styling. Still looks like a link when you click it. And cool. So now we can do this table thing. So where is our project actions, recent files. Here's our heading, and here's our rows. So I'm going to make the recent files, this whole section is going to be a grid. So we can say target the recent files element and say display grid. And that doesn't really change much of anything yet because the grid doesn't have any definitions. It's just a bunch of rows. So let me look at notes for this. So we want to give this grid, we don't want to define how many rows it has because it's a table. It could have like a ton of rows, but we do want to give it template columns. And we'll set these we'll use that FR unit to make everything kind of the same size, except there's this fourth column that doesn't have a heading, but it has these little action buttons. So we'll say all of these are the same, like one fractional unit, and then this one's just like a small column. Make that one like 50 pixels. And that already is a lot better. We've got to style the individual lines and everything, but it's in a table. And if we hover over this, we can see we've gotten our grid lines and everything. So let's give these rows, let's see, here's some files. So unlike a regular table, all these things are just directly direct children of this this grid element. So we have 4 divs. Because we have a fourth column, we've got this empty one. This is a placeholder. So we have the heading stuff, and then we've got these cells. But we don't have a way of targeting just like a row. We don't have, there's no wrapper that's like class equals row or whatever. And if we did that, it would, the grid would only apply to the row and not to the elements inside. So you could do, use Flexbox for the nested rows, and use grid for the wrapper thing. You could use Flexbox for the wrapper and Flexbox for the rows. Lots of ways to do this. But since we're just using grid, we'll just throw them all in here. And we've given them classes to distinguish between the headings and the cells so that we can color them differently. Because if we look at the design, we've got this heading, doesn't have a background, but all the cells do. So we'll say heading is going to have its own special kind of muted color. And then the cells, recent files cell, all these are going to be background white. And they're also going to have some padding. And I'd like to align everything vertically centered. So we're going to use display flex and align items center. And I'll just pull them all centered. And if I had more space, that probably wouldn't be wrapping. Yeah, there we go. This is always an issue with like designs in general. Like they work nice as a static picture, but then once you try to put content in them and the content gets too long or whatever, there's other problems that crop up. But we're not going to solve those problems. We're just gonna build it as designed. So we're gonna space this stuff out a little bit. This file type image thing could probably use a little bit of space between it and the text. So we can add, again, like kind of going down and to the right, we can add a margin right on the image. So we'll target recent files, and it's called file type image. We can give it a margin right, like 10 pixels or something maybe. That might be a little much. Let me try 7. That looks pretty good. So heading, I think the heading maybe should have a little more space below it. Actually, all of the rows should have more space below them. So we can use grid gap to give us that space. So on the parent grid element thing, we can use grid. So if we use grid gap, we don't actually want to use regular grid gap because that'll put, gaps between everything. We only want the gaps between the rows. So we can say grid row gap. And now we've got our space between each row. I think these spaces are actually a bit bigger. Let's see what this is. This is like 20. Let's say 20. So our row gap is going to be 20. And the individual cells need, they've got the padding already. And we've got to color or fix that button. I'm just going to paste this in. Yeah, I'll get the button right. Kind of the same thing we've done before, just coloring it and giving it a transparent background and stuff. So the last thing to do with these is to round the edges. If you look at the design, we've got rounded edges on these rows. This is a thing where like we don't have a way to target the row, right? So we have to target like the first element and round its edges, and this element round its edges. So there's this cool selector for this. So we can use cell and we can use nth child. And we want to, this is child starting at, I guess this is like 0th, right? So like 1, 2, 3, maybe this is 1, first, second, third, fourth, fifth. This is 5th. So if we say nth child 5, and we set its, let's just say color red. So it's if we, are we actually targeting this thing? Cool. So we've got this element here, and we can set its border only the top left and the bottom left. Border top left radius to say like 10 pixels, and we'll set the border bottom left radius also to 10 pixels. And now if you can see, those two are rounded, but nothing else is rounded yet. So you know, we could copy and paste this and change the number, but like, what do we do if we have more than 4 rows? So handily, this nth child thing, you can like do math in here, which is pretty cool. So you can say like 4n plus 1, and now it's finding elements that match. It's like every like 1 after a multiple of 4, and we're only targeting cells, so we skip all the heading stuff. Now we're targeting these 4, and we've got this rounded edge on them. So now all that's left is to do the same thing to these last 4. So we can kind of copy and paste this, and instead of top and bottom left, we'll do top and bottom right. And instead of 4n plus 1, we want 4, and it's every 4, right? 1, 2, 3, 4. And then another 1, 2, 3, 4. So it's every multiple of 4 we'll get this this treatment. Oh, and it's not going to color red because there's no text there. Make it like background red just to see. Yeah, see? There we go. We got that one, and we got this one. And that looks awful. So let's get rid of that coloring. So there's our border radiuses. Cool. I think that's pretty good. We got this table, and we've got shared with me. This section is kind of the same as the projects. And I zoom out here. Then we've got this storage stuff on the right. But we're about 2 hours in now. Coming up on 3 p.m. here. I think I'm gonna call it good for today. I'll post the solution that I came up with to the GitHub repo. So I've got pretty much all of this kind of mapped out. Now I didn't get these little arcs here. I think I looked into how to do arcs in CSS, and it's kind of tricky. It seemed like the way to go was to use SVG, and then you've got to like figure out the right like points to draw arcs around a circle. But I've got everything else except the little arcs. So I'll put that stuff up on GitHub. I'll send out an email with the link, but it'll be in the same repo as the one in the previous emails. And I guess that's kind of it. Hopefully this was helpful. Anyone have any more questions or anything before we sign off? I'll wait for the chat to catch up. I think there's a big delay between the video and the chat today. Welcome. Thanks. This has been fun. Yeah, maybe I'll try to do more of these little challenge things. Because we could do some React stuff. We could do more CSS stuff. This took a lot longer to build than I thought it would, both during this live stream and before this live stream when I was building it myself. So yeah, I don't know. It's always sort of interesting when you start a project and you're like, this is going to be super easy, and it turns out no, it's not actually that easy. But yeah, I like SCSS. Yeah, I use SCSS on my blog. I've used it a bunch before. I didn't use it here because I didn't want to teach like multiple things at the same time. I know it's like pretty much just nesting, but kind of wanted to stick to regular CSS. Definitely SCSS is great though. Yeah, thanks everyone for coming. We'll talk to you later. Stay safe. Stay home. All right. Bye everyone.